It's curtains for Repsol Honda. MotoGP's most iconic team and sponsor partnership has run its course and will formally conclude on December 31st, 2024, after 30 seasons together. It would have been an unimaginable split a decade ago, and yes, a Repsol-less Honda will take a while to get used to, but this legendary sponsorship deal was already rumoured to be on shaky ground even before Honda's on-track performances totally collapsed. Here's Simon Patterson in the MotoGP paddock to tell you more about this impending split.
The only thing that really came as a surprise about this was the timing of it coming in on the Sunday afternoon while we were still talking to riders after the San Marino Grand Prix. But as a story, we've known this has been coming for quite some time. There's been hints at it. I mean, there's been hints at it for the past few seasons, never mind just coming into this season. But whenever the 2024 year started, whenever Repsol Honda first pulled the covers off their new bike, and we saw that there was a dramatically reduced Repsol presence on it. I mean, as you can see, even behind me on the team trucks this year, there's been a reduced Repsol branding presence on their bikes. It was no surprise that whenever the current deal was due to expire at the end of 2024 and fresh rumours come out to suggest that it wasn't going to be renewed, that was made official. It comes amid a rocky phase for Honda, obviously, but it also comes amid a massive shake-up in the way that the Repsol Honda team is structured without the presence of Marquez. And that is, one factor along with the bike performance that has contributed to this. But there's other factors as well. Whenever you read, some of the financial papers, and it seems like Repsol aren't quite the brand that they were maybe 15 or 20 years ago when they were pumping serious money into this project. I mean, whenever you look at all those factors combined, it's not really a huge surprise that we are where we are today.
The 2020s are not going well for Honda in MotoGP. It was exposed by Marquez's career-changing health injury in 2020 and was dealt a secondary blow by COVID-19 restrictions hitting its development pipelines harder than those of its rivals. But 2024 has been something different entirely. With Marquez now plying his trade elsewhere, Honda has not finished a single Grand Prix in the top 10 so far this season. It is effectively assured of by far its least productive MotoGP season ever. And now, with a long-serving title sponsor withdrawing, should you fear for Honda's MotoGP future?
I mean, it's been perhaps the most long-standing tradition in Japanese involvement in global motorsport that racing is Honda. That's the famous phrase from founder Sorocho Honda in the 1950s and 60s, and it stands true till today. There is absolutely no reason at all to think that Honda are in any way considering even reducing the size of their presence in the MotoGP grid or in motorcycle racing as a whole. If anything, it's starting to look the other way. They're finally starting to throw some resources into places that we've said for a while they needed to put some money into. They're starting to follow what has become the Yamaha way of doing things, hire some European engineers to work on key areas like aero and engine development. They're securing long-term deals with really interesting test riders like Aleix Espargaro. As a whole, it looks like things are still very much that Honda are trying to dig themselves out of this hole, and that really what we're seeing is simply the end of a relationship that, let's be honest, is only really notable because of just how long it has been. Most sponsor relations don't last as long as this one has. Yet, here we are since, I think, 1995, nearly 30 years down the line, talking about the continuing links between Honda. And, it's also worth saying, I don't think this is the end of Repsol within MotoGP. I don't even necessarily think this is the end of Repsol with Honda. It's the end of their title partnership, yes. But as a fuel and lubricants brand, MotoGP is in a really interesting place right now. We're now using 40% synthetic fuel as from this year. From 2027, we're going to full 100% synthetic fuel, which is somewhere that all fuel manufacturers want to be. It's something that they all want to be involved in. They still have an R&D project to run, and the best place to run R&D projects has traditionally been in motorsport. So, I think that it'll be interesting to see what comes out in the next few weeks, whether or not there's still going to be some sort of a link between the two brands. And the other question that I've been asked a lot since this news was announced was what this means for whether Repsol might try and follow Marc Marquez to Ducati, for example. But I also don't see that being realistic for all the reasons I've just listed, because Ducati have a long-standing partnership with Shell. They've worked a lot with them as part of this move to synthetic fuels over the last 18 months. They're continuing to work very closely with them. That's a strong relationship. It's one that they're not going to be too quick to replace just because Marc Marquez, for all the same reasons that, Gresini, Ducati weren't very fast this year to replace any of their long-standing sponsors with ones that might have come with Marquez either.
The belief that Honda will be back remains unshaken in the MotoGP paddock. Surely a factory that dominated the way it did with Marquez, with Valentino Rossi, with Mick Doohan, will not stay down for long. Yet, on track, signs of improvement have been precious few. A 2024 reworking of MotoGP's concession system has allowed Honda and Yamaha major benefits relative to their rivals. So far, those benefits have not translated. It isn't clear whether simply too little time has passed, or whether Honda is not making the best use of what it's allowed. All the while, its current riders range from stoic to frustrated, to bouncing between stoic and frustrated weekend to weekend.
I mean, when you've got a former world champion like Joan Mir and a rider who was consistently in the podium last season, like Luca Marini on board the bike right now, obviously you're going to get frustration from them, regardless of how much work you're doing in the background to change the situation. That's just natural. That's racers for you. But I think there is signs, lots of signs coming that things are getting a little bit easier. It was never going to be a slow process for Honda. It was never going to happen overnight. But we're starting to see them making some really, really key changes, some important differences in the background. And I think we're going to see those paying off over the course of it's hard to say. Will it be the next few weeks? No. The next 3 months? Maybe. The next few years? The next seasons? Absolutely. Key among those, of course, is that, they are finally starting to work on what has been the number one Honda frustration over the years. They've started to think a bit more European. They've done what Yamaha have done, where we've seen them poaching already a lot of European engineering talent. Honda are now jumping onto that bandwagon a little bit with the kind of imminent announcement, we believe, of the signing of Fabiano Sterlicini, who's a former Ducati engineer who briefly had a stint at KTM as well, but while at the Italian brand was essentially Gigi Dall'Igna's right-hand man, and comes with a wealth of knowledge and probably quite a bit of data on basically how to incorporate aero into motorbikes instead of just slapping it on at the end and seeing what happens, because that's been the way that it looks visually from the outside Honda have been working over the past few years. The other thing that they've started to do is really, really significantly work in the test team over the past seasons. We've seen the addition, as we mentioned earlier, of Aleix Espargaro to the team for next season, which is really important from the European end of things, and having a really fast, essentially current race winner on board the bike for all the private testing that they're allowed to do under their concession status. But they've also added Taka Nakagami. They're moving him over from the LCR team, putting him into the Japanese-based test team primarily. But we're going to see a lot of him in Europe as well. He's going to be traveling back and forth. He's going to be coming to lots of races. And that's really, really important, because Taka has essentially framed himself as Honda's translator. He's someone that understands how the European racing side of things works, as well as how the Japanese engineering side of things works. And he's going to be working really hard this season, or next season, as something of a middleman to make sure that the left hand knows what the right hand is doing, to make sure that there's more feedback going back and forth between the two sides, that both sides know what the other's doing, hopefully just speeding up the whole process of making the bike better. How quickly we're going to see the bike get made better, it's not certain yet. Like I said earlier, it's not going to happen instantly. But there's still 2 long seasons to go under the current MotoGP regulations. There's a lot of opportunity to make things better. And they've been given these concessions. They had to fight hard to get their concession status, along with Yamaha, MotoGP's only other Japanese factory. And to be fair to Honda and Yamaha, they've embraced it. They've made the most of what they've been given in terms of doing updates, bringing new parts, doing lots of private testing. And it's all eventually going to start contribute to putting back Honda where we expect them to be, essentially.
The question then is whether Honda can still salvage something from the current MotoGP era, or whether it's all about nailing the 2027 regulation changes featuring reduced aero, a ban on ride height devices, and a new 850cc engine. Should Honda forget about 2025 and 2026 and go all in on 2027 already? Or is it not that simple?
Obviously, there's a limited amount of time left until we see new MotoGP regulations come into play, whenever the new rules come in 2027. But the important thing is to remember that the knowledge that is gained, especially in things like aero, will only become more and more important the less aero there is in the bike. Because the people that know what they're doing now will be more equipped to know what they're doing whenever they have less to work with. So as a result, we're going to see a continued focus on it. We're going to see Honda reaping the benefits from what they they perform in the next few years. And that's a reason to keep working at it and to keep making sure that they're doing everything they can, even knowing that those new regulations are coming. We've seen Yamaha, again, to make the comparison another time, continuing to work really hard at that. And it's starting to pay off for them already. If you imagine that Honda are kind of that 1 year behind, then realistically, by the middle of next season, by another year's time, we're going to see Honda creeping back towards the sharp end. I think the way we're seeing Yamaha now, obviously we're fresh off the back of a really strong weekend for Fabio Quartararo at Misano, and I think that's a hint of what's to come. If Honda are in a position where they're occasionally contesting podiums, let's say if they're in an Aprilia or a KTM situation by the start of 2026, they're going to be pleased. They're going to count that as a success. Maybe it's not going to be enough of a success to lure Repsol Honda back, or to lure Repsol back and to see that title sponsorship back in place for the start of a brave new world in 2027, whenever Marc Marquez gloriously rejoins the team for the new regulations. But I think, wild speculation aside, I wouldn't be surprised if Repsol maybe live to regret their decision to walk away just a little bit once we see the full might of Honda really kicking to action and deliver what we know they can deliver.